"Your name is not missing, Mrs. Whitmore," the young woman at the check-in table said without looking up. "It simply does not exist." For one quiet second, Naomi Brooks Whitmore thought she had misheard her. The marble lobby of the St. Aurelia Hotel glittered around her like a dream built for people who never had to ask permission to enter. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm gold over the black and white floor. Violin music drifted from the ballroom beyond the tall double doors. Behind those doors, 200 of New York's wealthiest donors were raising champagne glasses for the Second Door Initiative, the scholarship program Naomi had built from church basements, borrowed offices, and nights when she had answered emails at 2 a.m. with cold coffee beside her laptop. Yet here she stood, 31 years old, wearing a simple navy dress, pearl earrings, and the thin diamond wedding band Alexander had slipped onto her finger in a courthouse chapel 8 months earlier, being told that she did not exist. The woman behind the tablet smiled the kind of smile that had no warmth in it. "Maybe you're at the wrong entrance," she added. "Staff check-in is around the side of the building." Naomi felt the words land, soft as silk and sharp as glass. She did not flinch. Her mother had taught her early that humiliation often arrived dressed as politeness, especially in rooms where money believed itself to be manners. Naomi opened her small black clutch and removed the cream invitation embossed with the Whitmore Global Foundation seal. "I was invited as a guest," she said, her voice calm enough to make the woman finally look up. "My name is Naomi Brooks Whitmore." At the sound of that last name, the woman's fingers paused over the screen. Something flickered across her face. Not surprise. Recognition. Fear maybe. But before she could answer, a smooth voice floated in from behind Naomi like perfume over cold air. "Brooks Whitmore," Victoria Hargrove said, letting the name hang just loudly enough for the nearest guests to turn. She moved through the lobby in a silver gown that shimmered like polished ice. Her blonde hair swept into a perfect knot, her smile sharpened by years of never being questioned. How imaginative. Naomi turned slowly. She knew Victoria from photographs, from gala announcements, from the kind of society pages that made charity look like theater. Victoria chaired tonight's event. She also belonged to the old world Alexander had been born into, a world of private schools, summer homes in Newport, and family names engraved on hospital wings. "Good evening," Naomi said. "There seems to be a mistake with the guest list." Victoria looked down at Naomi's invitation, then at her dress, then at the plain black heels that had carried Naomi through more hospital corridors and community meetings than ballrooms. "A mistake, yes," she said gently, though her eyes were not gentle at all. "These things happen when invitations are forwarded or misunderstood." The lobby grew quieter. A man in a tuxedo lowered his glass. A woman near the coat check leaned closer to listen. Naomi could feel the room gathering around her without moving, feeding on the small cruelty of watching someone be measured and found inconvenient. "It was not forwarded," Naomi said. "It was sent to me." Victoria gave a soft laugh. "My dear, this is a Whitmore Foundation gala. Security is very careful. We cannot simply allow anyone to walk in because she found a pretty envelope." The check-in woman stared at her tablet as if it might rescue her. Naomi felt heat rise beneath her skin, but her hands remained still. She thought of the students whose scholarship letters were scheduled to be announced that night. She thought of the mothers who had written to her saying one open door could change a family for generations. She thought of Alexander, delayed by an emergency board call, promising he would meet her inside before the first speech. He had wanted to announce her publicly tonight. She had asked him not to make a spectacle of their marriage. "Let the work speak first," she had told him that morning. Now the work was inside the ballroom, wearing her fingerprints, while she stood outside being treated like a stain on the carpet. Victoria tilted her head. "Perhaps you should leave before this becomes uncomfortable." Naomi looked at the closed ballroom doors. Beyond them the gold light pulsed with music and applause. She could have explained. She could have raised her hand and shown the ring. She could have said Alexander Whitmore was her husband and watched the room rearrange its face. But dignity was not the same thing as desperation, and Naomi had never begged to be seen. "No," she said quietly. "I will not leave because someone decided I did not belong." Victoria's smile disappeared for half a heartbeat. Then she turned to the security guard near the entrance and lifted 2 fingers with effortless authority. "Please escort this woman out." The guard stepped forward, apologetic but obedient. Naomi did not move. The chandelier light caught her wedding ring, sending one clean spark across the marble floor. At that exact moment the check-in tablet chimed. A new window opened on the screen. The young woman's face went pale. Naomi saw only one line before the woman tried to cover it with her hand. Naomi Brooks Whitmore. Removed from guest list at 7:48 p.m. by Victoria Hargrove. The guard stopped before his hand ever reached Naomi's arm, not because anyone had ordered him to, but because something in her stillness made the entire lobby hesitate. She stood beneath the chandelier with her shoulders relaxed, her chin lifted, and her eyes fixed on the tablet as if one line of digital evidence had just revealed the true architecture of the room. Victoria Hargrove had erased her name. Not accidentally. Not through a clerical misunderstanding. Deliberately, with a timestamp and authorization code, and the kind of confidence that came from believing no one would ever ask questions of a woman born into power. The young woman at check-in swallowed hard and angled the tablet away, but it was too late. Naomi had seen enough. Victoria saw it too. For the first time that evening, the polished calm on her face cracked at the edges. Only slightly. Only for a second. Then she recovered, smoothing one hand over the silver fabric at her waist as if even guilt could be pressed flat with the right gesture. There must be a technical issue, Victoria said, her voice sweet again but thinner now. These tablets have been giving us trouble all night. Naomi turned to her slowly. The music behind the ballroom doors swelled, a graceful string arrangement meant to make wealthy people feel generous. It sounded strange now, almost cruel, floating above a scene built on exclusion. A technical issue does not know your name, Naomi said. The words were not loud, but they cut through the lobby more cleanly than a shout could have. A few guests looked away. Others pretended to check their phones. That was the way polite society protected itself from shame. It made witnesses out of people and then taught them to act blind. Victoria gave a small laugh, but no one joined her. You are making this much larger than it needs to be. Naomi held the invitation at her side. The thick paper felt suddenly heavier, not because it proved she had been invited, but because it proved how little proof mattered when someone had already decided who you were. She thought of the ballroom beyond those doors, decorated with photographs of smiling students from her program. She had personally called 3 of those students when their scholarship applications were accepted. She had listened to one young man cry quietly because he could finally enroll at Howard University without asking his mother to take a second job. She had helped a young woman from Queens buy her first nursing textbooks. She had spent months building donor packets, reviewing budgets and rewriting speeches so the foundation would not turn real people into pretty stories for rich applause. Tonight, the work was being celebrated without her. Her hands remained steady. No, Naomi said. I think it is exactly as large as it needs to be. Victoria's eyes cooled. You should be careful. This event is private property. So is dignity, Naomi replied. The guard shifted uncomfortably, his gaze moving from Victoria to Naomi and back again. He was a large man with kind eyes and a radio clipped to his jacket, someone trained to follow instructions, not read the moral temperature of a room. Ma'am, he said softly to Naomi, I am sorry, but I have been asked to escort you outside. Naomi looked at him, and her expression softened. I know you are doing your job. That kindness embarrassed him more than anger would have. His hand dropped to his side. Victoria noticed and stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate, while still allowing others to hear. This is what I was trying to prevent, she said. A scene. Naomi finally looked at her fully. Beneath the chandelier's golden light, the contrast between them seemed almost painted into the marble itself. Victoria in silver, sharp and glittering. Naomi in navy, quiet and unbending. No, Victoria, Naomi said. You were trying to prevent my presence. A soft gasp slipped from someone near the coat check. Victoria's jaw tightened. For a moment, the mask vanished completely, and behind it Naomi saw something older than jealousy. She saw the fear of a woman who had built her worth on locked doors, and could not bear to see someone else walk through one without asking her permission. Women like you always misunderstand rooms like this, Victoria said, her voice low and cold now. You think kindness gives you a seat at the table. Naomi felt the lobby grow still around that sentence. Even the violin music seemed to fade behind the doors. She did not blink. "No," she said. "I think character does." Then the double doors opened. A burst of warm light spilled across the marble. Applause rolled out from the ballroom, followed by the sound of a man announcing Alexander Whitmore's arrival was expected any moment. Victoria turned toward the sound, relief flashing across her face as if Alexander's name itself belonged to her. Naomi saw that relief and understood something painful and clear. Victoria was not only trying to remove her from the guest list. She was trying to erase her from Alexander's world before he arrived to place her at the center of it. The open ballroom doors changed the air before they changed the room. Warmth swept into the lobby first, carrying the scent of white roses, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Then came the light, spilling over Naomi's navy dress and turning the thin diamond band on her finger into a quiet flame. For one suspended moment, everyone seemed to wait for Alexander Whitmore to appear from inside the gala, as though his arrival would restore the old order Victoria had tried so carefully to protect. But Alexander did not come from the ballroom. He came from the hotel's main entrance behind them, his black tuxedo still sharp from the evening air, his overcoat folded across one arm, his silver eyes taking in the scene with the kind of stillness that made powerful people nervous. He had heard enough. Naomi knew it before he said a word. She saw it in the way his gaze moved from the security guard to the tablet, then to Victoria, then finally to her face. Not anger first. Pain. A clean private pain that he tried to hide because men like Alexander had been trained to treat emotion like a weakness and control like a language. But his eyes found her hand, the invitation still held between her fingers, and something in his expression hardened. The lobby went silent in layers. The check-in woman stepped back from the table. The guard straightened. Victoria's relief drained away so quickly it left her smile stranded on her face. "Alexander," she said, bright and brittle. "Thank goodness. There has been a misunderstanding." He did not look at her. He walked directly to Naomi, each step measured against the marble floor. Not hurried, not theatrical, just certain. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that the room understood before his mouth confirmed it. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. The question was quiet, meant only for her. But in that silence every guest heard it. Naomi looked at him, and for the first time that night, her composure trembled at the edge. Not because she was weak. Because being defended by someone who loved you could sometimes hurt more than being insulted by someone who did not. "I am standing," she said. Alexander's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. He knew she used dignity the way other people used armor. He turned then slowly toward the security guard. "You were asked to remove her?" The guard's face flushed with discomfort. "Sir, I was following instructions from the event chair." Alexander nodded once, not blaming the man for holding a door someone else had locked. "You may step aside." The guard did. Victoria lifted her chin. "Alexander. Truly, this has become unnecessarily dramatic. Her name was not on the list, and with an event of this caliber, we have protocols." Alexander finally looked at her. Her name was on the list. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me." He reached toward the check-in table without raising his voice. "Show me the audit record." The young woman froze, her hand hovering over the tablet. Victoria's smile vanished. "That will not be necessary." "It is necessary because you made it necessary." His voice was calm, but the calm had weight. The kind that made champagne glasses stop halfway to lips. The young woman turned the screen toward him with trembling fingers. Alexander read the line. Naomi Brooks Whitmore removed at 7:48 p.m. by Victoria Hargrove. He stared at it for 1 second, then another. When he looked up, the man who had built companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and faced boardrooms filled with rivals was gone. In his place stood a husband who had just realized his silence had left his wife alone at the door. "You erased my wife from the guest list," he said. The words moved through the lobby like a bell struck in a cathedral. Victoria went pale. Someone near the ballroom entrance whispered, "His wife." Alexander turned fully toward the crowd now, and his hand found Naomi's, not possessive, not performative, but steady. He lifted it just enough for the chandelier light to catch her ring. "For anyone who was confused," he said, his voice carrying through the lobby and into the open ballroom beyond. "This is Naomi Brooks Whitmore. She is my wife, the founder of the Second Door Initiative, and the reason most of you are here tonight." The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with every careless glance, every whispered judgment, every closed door pretending to be tradition. Naomi felt the room rearrange itself around her, not with kindness yet, but with shock. Victoria opened her mouth, but Alexander did not give her space to fill the air with another polished lie. "You did not remove a stranger," he said. "You removed the woman whose work gave this event its purpose." Naomi looked at the ballroom, at the donor standing beneath the gold light, at the faces that had watched her humiliation as if it were background music to their evening. Then she looked at Alexander, and though his hand held hers, she understood this moment could not belong only to him. If she let him speak every truth for her, they would remember his power and forget her voice. So Naomi gently released his hand and stepped forward. The movement was small, but it shifted the room again. "I was told I did not exist," she said, her voice calm, clear, and impossible to ignore. "That is a strange thing to say to a woman whose work you came here to applaud." For a moment, Naomi's words stood between the chandeliers and the marble floor like a truth no one had prepared to hear. The applause inside the ballroom had died completely, leaving behind the faint clink of ice in forgotten glasses and the low hum of the hotel's air conditioning. She could feel Alexander beside her, not stepping in front of her, not rescuing her from her own voice, only standing close enough to remind the room that she was not alone. Victoria's face tightened with the effort of remaining beautiful while being exposed. "Naomi," she said, using her name now because the room had learned it, "I am sure you understand how easily these administrative things happen. There is no need to turn a small mistake into a moral performance." Naomi studied her for a quiet second. She had met women like Victoria before. Women who could insult you with velvet gloves, and then accuse you of bleeding too loudly. "A mistake is when someone types the wrong letter," Naomi said. "What you did required a password." A murmur moved through the guests, soft but unmistakable. Alexander turned to the hotel manager, who had arrived breathless from the far end of the lobby, his black suit buttoned incorrectly in his hurry. "I want the full audit copied and preserved," Alexander said. "Now." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore." Victoria's eyes flashed. "Alexander, you cannot be serious. I have given years to this foundation. And tonight you used it to humiliate the woman who gave it a conscience," Alexander replied. His voice did not rise, but the sentence landed with the finality of a closing door. Naomi looked through the open ballroom doors. On the stage beyond them, a large screen glowed with the Second Door Initiative logo, a simple white doorway opening into sunrise. She remembered drawing that logo at her kitchen table in Atlanta with a borrowed laptop and a box of markers from a discount store. Back then there had been no marble, no champagne, no string quartet. There had only been a list of students who needed help and not enough money to help them. Her gaze softened, not for Victoria, not for the guests, but for the reason she had come. "I do not want this evening to become about one person's cruelty," Naomi said. "It was never supposed to be about me." Alexander looked at her then, and something unspoken passed between them. He knew that was not entirely true. The evening should have been about her work, her vision, her years of carrying other people's futures in folders and spreadsheets in prayer. But he also knew she would never ask for a crown, even when she had earned one. Victoria seized the pause. "Exactly," she said quickly. "Then let us all return to the program with grace." Naomi turned back to her. "Grace is not pretending nothing happened. Grace is telling the truth without becoming what hurt you." The words changed the lobby. Even those who had wanted to disappear into silence had to stand inside them now. Near the coat check, an older black woman in a deep purple gown placed her hand over her heart. A young server stopped beside the wall, eyes fixed on Naomi as if hearing something she had needed for years. Alexander stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Naomi heard the first sentence. "I am sorry." She did not look away from the room. For what? For thinking privacy and protection were the same thing. That nearly broke her composure. Not visibly. Naomi had survived too many rooms like this to fall apart in one. But her breath caught, small and sharp, and Alexander saw it. He reached for her hand again, slowly enough to let her choose. She let him take it. His thumb rested lightly against her ring, a quiet apology made of touch and restraint. "I should have walked through every door with you," he said. "Not because you needed me to open them, but because no one should have been allowed to close them in your face." Naomi finally looked at him. The coldness in her chest did not vanish, but it loosened. She remembered the man behind the billionaire name. The man who had once sat on a folding chair in a church basement and listened to a single mother explain how one medical bill could ruin an entire year. That was the man she had married. Not the name. Not the towers. The man. "Then stand beside me," she said. "Not in front of me." Alexander nodded. "Always." Victoria watched them with a bitterness she could no longer disguise. The ballroom guests watched too, but now the gaze had changed. It was no longer the curious stare people give a scandal. It was the uneasy attention people give a mirror. Naomi turned toward the open doors and began to walk into the ballroom. Alexander walked beside her, one step back, exactly where she had asked him to be. As she crossed the threshold that had been denied to her minutes earlier, the chandelier light widened over her navy dress like dawn finding water. No one applauded at first. Perhaps they did not know if they had the right. Then the older woman in purple began clapping, slow and deliberate. One by one, others joined until the sound filled the room, not loud enough to erase what had happened, but strong enough to admit they had seen it. Naomi did not smile. Not yet. She walked to the stage, placed her invitation on the podium, and looked out at the people who had come to celebrate doors while watching one close. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Naomi Brooks Whitmore. And before we raise money tonight, we are going to talk about why some names disappear from lists in the first place." Naomi let the silence settle before she continued, because silence, when held with dignity, could become a kind of light. The ballroom that had glittered with effortless wealth now looked different from the stage. The crystal chandeliers still burned above the round tables. The white roses still climbed the gold stands. The champagne still waited in tall flutes beside folded donation cards. But the faces beneath all that beauty had changed. Some looked ashamed. Some looked defensive. Some looked at Naomi for the first time as if she were not an interruption to the evening, but the reason the evening had a soul. She rested both hands on the sides of the podium, feeling the smooth wood beneath her palms. Behind her, the Second Door Initiative logo glowed on the screen, a doorway opening toward sunrise. "When I started this program," she said, "there was no ballroom. There was no foundation seal, no press table, no orchestra, no dinner that cost more than a student's first semester of books." A small ripple moved through the room. Naomi did not soften the truth to make it comfortable. There was a church basement in Atlanta with a leaking ceiling, 3 folding tables, and a mother who cried because her daughter had been accepted to Spelman College and still could not afford the deposit. The older woman in purple lowered her eyes, pressing a handkerchief gently to the corner of one eye. Alexander stood near the side of the stage, one step back as promised, watching his wife with an expression that held pride and regret in equal measure. Naomi did not need to look at him to know he was there. His presence had become quiet now, not a shield but a witness. "That mother told me something I never forgot," Naomi continued. "She said, 'My child did everything right, but every door still has a price tag.' That sentence became the beginning of this work." Victoria stood near the entrance, frozen beside 2 members of the gala committee. She had not left yet. Pride had kept her in the room, but the room no longer belonged to her. Eleanor Whitmore, Alexander's mother, sat at the front table in a silver-gray gown, her posture elegant, her face unreadable. Naomi had always felt Eleanor's politeness like a winter coat, beautiful from a distance, cold up close. Tonight, even Eleanor looked as if the ground beneath the family name had shifted. Naomi looked across the donors, the executives, the socialites, the people who had paid thousands of dollars to sit near influence and call it charity. Second Door was built for people who are talented enough, disciplined enough, and brave enough but still get stopped at entrances they earned the right to cross. Sometimes that entrance is a college admissions office. Sometimes it is a hospital internship. Sometimes it is a boardroom. And sometimes, she paused, letting the words breathe, it is a ballroom door. No one moved. The truth had become too precise to avoid. Naomi's voice remained calm, But beneath the calm lived every student she had ever fought for, every application she had edited after midnight, every donor call where she had smiled through someone's hidden doubt. "I was asked tonight if I was at the right event," she said. "The better question is whether this event has remembered its purpose." A man at the third table slowly set down his champagne glass. A young woman from the press table looked up from her notes, eyes bright, recording every word. Naomi reached for the folder placed on the podium, the one she had prepared before the humiliation, before the tablet, before Victoria's name appeared beside her erasure. Inside were photographs and letters from students whose futures depended on this room doing more than applauding itself. She lifted the first page. "This is Maya Thompson from Baltimore," Naomi said. She earned a 4.0 grade point average while helping care for her younger brothers and working 20 hours a week at a grocery store. She wants to become a pediatric nurse. The screen behind her changed to Maya's smiling photograph, and a gentle sound moved through the guests, not pity but recognition. Naomi lifted another page. "This is Daniel Reyes from Queens. He built a free tutoring group in his neighborhood after school, because he believed no child should fail algebra, just because their parents could not afford help." Another photograph appeared. More faces softened. More backs straightened. Naomi let the students fill the room one by one until the evening no longer belonged to the insult at the door, or to Victoria's cruelty, or even to Alexander's declaration. It belonged to the young people whose names would never be erased if Naomi had anything to say about it. Then she closed the folder and looked at the donors with quiet fire. "Tonight, I am not asking you to give because you feel sorry for anyone. I am asking you to give because access should not depend on who recognizes your last name, who likes your face, or who believes you belong." The first pledge card was lifted by the older woman in purple. Then another. Then another. Across the ballroom, hands began to rise like small lamps in a dark field. Alexander watched the numbers climb on the donation screen, but his eyes kept returning to Naomi. She had entered the room as the woman they tried to remove. Now she stood at the center of it, not because he had placed her there, but because purpose had carried her across a threshold no prejudice could keep closed. The donation screen kept changing, the numbers rising in clean white digits above the stage as if the room itself had begun to confess. $50,000 became 100,000. 100,000 became 250,000. Pledge cards moved from table to table. Pens scratched across thick paper. People who had arrived expecting a polished charity dinner now sat beneath the chandeliers with the uncomfortable knowledge that generosity meant very little if it still required permission from prejudice. Naomi stepped away from the podium only when the final student photograph faded from the screen. The applause that followed was not the glittering automatic kind she had heard from outside the doors. It came slower, deeper, and with a weight that made several guests stand before they seemed to realize they were standing. Alexander did not clap immediately. He only looked at her, his face composed for the room but unguarded for her. There were apologies in his eyes he had not yet found words for, and Naomi knew the evening had changed something between them that could not be repaired by a public gesture alone. Love could open a door, but trust still had to walk through it. As she stepped down from the stage, Eleanor Whitmore rose from the front table. The movement was small, but everyone near her noticed. Eleanor had spent decades mastering the art of being observed without ever looking uncertain. Tonight, uncertainty softened the careful lines of her face. She approached Naomi with measured steps, silver gray silk whispering around her, pearls resting at her throat like a family tradition made visible. Alexander moved as if to speak, but Eleanor lifted one hand. "Please," she said quietly. "Let me." Naomi stopped at the foot of the stage. The ballroom held its breath again, though this silence felt different from the one in the lobby. It was no longer waiting for humiliation. It was waiting for courage. Eleanor looked at Naomi, and for the first time since they had met, her eyes did not pass over Naomi like a guest inspecting a room. They stayed. "I told myself I was protecting the family," Eleanor said. Her voice was steady, but there was a thin break beneath it. "I told myself Alexander's private marriage should remain private until society had time to adjust." She inhaled softly. But that was not protection. That was fear dressed in manners. Alexander's expression tightened. Naomi remained still. Eleanor turned slightly, allowing the nearest tables and the press to hear every word. Tonight I watched my daughter-in-law stand at a door I should have helped open. I watched her treat it as though she needed proof of belonging in a room filled with her own work. And I said nothing until shame made silence impossible. Victoria, still near the entrance, looked down at the floor. The committee members beside her had quietly stepped away, leaving a visible space around her that no gown, no jewelry, no old name could fill. Eleanor faced Naomi again. "I am sorry," she said. "Not because Alexander loves you. Not because the room now respects you. I am sorry because I knew better, and I chose comfort over truth." The apology moved through Naomi with unexpected force. She had prepared herself for defense, denial, polished excuses, the kind of regret rich families offered only when reputation demanded it. She had not prepared for honesty. For a second, she saw not the Whitmore matriarch, not the woman whose approval had always felt locked behind glass, but a mother standing inside the wreckage of her own pride. Naomi nodded once. "Thank you for saying it clearly." Eleanor's eyes shone, but she did not reach for Naomi, did not perform tenderness for the cameras. That restraint mattered. It let the apology remain clean. Alexander stepped beside Naomi then, close but not crowding her. "Victoria will be removed from the gala committee and from every Whitmore Foundation board effective tonight," he said. His voice carried through the ballroom with quiet finality. "The audit record will be provided to the full board, and the foundation will undergo an independent review of its leadership, access policies, and donor practices." Victoria's head snapped up, her lips parting. "Alexander, after everything my family has given to yours, you would humiliate me publicly?" He looked at her with a sadness colder than anger. "No, Victoria. You did that yourself. I am only refusing to hide it." The sentence closed around her like winter. She gathered her silver clutch with trembling hands and walked toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one followed. The same door she had tried to guard now opened for her departure, and the irony was so quiet it became more powerful than applause. Naomi watched her go without triumph. Revenge would have been too small for what this night had become. Alexander turned to Naomi, his voice lowering for her alone. "I should have told the world about you before the world made you prove yourself to me." Naomi looked up at him. "I never needed to prove myself to you." "I know," he said. "That is what makes my mistake unforgivable, unless I spend the rest of my life honoring what I should have protected." The ballroom blurred around them, not disappearing but softening at the edges. Naomi saw the man she had married, stripped for a moment of wealth, family expectation, and public control. He was only Alexander, sorry and afraid of having wounded the one person who had loved him without needing his name. She touched his hand briefly, enough to steady him and herself. "Do not make a speech out of it," she said gently. "Make a change." His breath caught, almost a laugh, almost a prayer. "I will." Then, with the entire room still watching but no longer owning the moment, he bent and placed a quiet kiss on the back of her hand. It was not possession. It was promise. Naomi let it rest there for one heartbeat before she turned back toward the students' photographs glowing on the screen, because the night was not finished. The door had opened, but now she intended to make sure it stayed open for everyone behind her. The ballroom did not return to what it had been before. Could not. The chandeliers still glowed, the orchestra still waited near the far wall, and the dinner plates still rested beneath silver domes, but the room had crossed an invisible line. Before Naomi spoke, the gala had been a performance of generosity. After she spoke, it became a test of character. The donation total climbed past $500,000, then $700,000, then $1 million. A soft gasp rose when the screen refreshed again, but Naomi did not look at the number first. She looked at the faces of the students on the screen, young people from Baltimore, Queens, Detroit, Atlanta, and South Los Angeles, each one carrying a future that deserved more than a locked door. Alexander stood beside the stage with his hands folded in front of him, watching the room give to the work his wife had built long before his last name had ever touched it. Eleanor returned to her table, quieter now, not defeated, but changed in the way pride changes when truth finally enters it. Then the hotel manager approached the podium with a small envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said carefully, "this was scheduled for later in the program, but I believe it belongs to this moment. Naomi accepted the envelope. Inside was the original ceremonial donor card, prepared weeks earlier by Victoria's committee. It listed the evening's honorees, corporate sponsors, and foundation board members in embossed gold letters. Naomi read it once, then again. Her name was nowhere on it. Not as founder. Not as program director. Not even as a speaker. The erasure had started long before the tablet at the front desk. A quiet ache moved through her, but it did not bend her. She placed the card on the podium beside her invitation, 2 pieces of expensive paper telling the same small lie. Then she looked at the room. I want to show you something, she said. The screen behind her changed again, this time to a photograph of a narrow hallway in a community center in Atlanta. The paint was chipped. The carpet was old. A paper sign taped to a door read, "Second door applications here." This was our first office, Naomi said. The door stuck in the summer because the building had no central air conditioning. When it rained, we put trash cans under the leaks. We did interviews with students while church volunteers packed canned goods in the next room. It was not elegant. It was not impressive. But no one who walked in was invisible. The room held still. She clicked to the next photo. A folding table covered with scholarship forms, then another showing Naomi in jeans and a cardigan, laughing beside 3 students holding acceptance letters. No one asked those students whether they came from the right zip code. No one asked if their parents knew the right donors. No one checked whether their shoes matched the room. We asked what they needed, what they dreamed of, and how we could help them carry what had become too heavy. At the press table, cameras lowered. People stopped recording for a moment and simply listened. Naomi picked up the gold donor card again. Tonight, my name was not printed here. That is disappointing, but it is not the wound. The wound is that rooms like this often celebrate work, while editing out the people who understand why the work matters. Alexander's eyes lowered. The sentence touched him too, and Naomi meant for it to. Love did not excuse him from accountability. It invited him into it. She looked toward the students seated at a small table near the back, 5 scholarship finalists who had arrived early and watched everything unfold with wide, uncertain eyes. Would you please come forward? She asked. They hesitated, then rose together. There was Maya from Baltimore, Daniel from Queens, Aaliyah from Detroit, Marcus from Atlanta, and Grace from South Los Angeles. They walked through the center aisle under the chandelier light, looking both nervous and luminous, as if the room were finally learning how to see them. Naomi stepped away from the podium and met them at the edge of the stage. This is why the door stays open, she said. One by one she handed each student a scholarship envelope. The applause began again, but this time it was not for wealth, image, or rescue. It was for futures becoming real in real time. Maya covered her mouth with both hands. Daniel blinked hard and looked at the ceiling. Aaliyah held her envelope against her chest as if it were fragile and alive. Naomi watched them, and the ache inside her changed shape. It became purpose. Alexander came forward only after the students had received their moment. He did not take the microphone. He did not center himself. He simply stood at Naomi's side as the donation screen crossed $1.2 million. Then he turned to the foundation board seated near the front. Beginning tonight, he said, Second Door Initiative will operate with Naomi Brooks Whitmore as permanent chair, with full authority over its mission, budget, and leadership appointments. The announcement moved through the ballroom with another wave of shock, but Naomi did not look surprised. Alexander had not given her power. He had finally stopped allowing others to pretend she did not already have it. Eleanor stood first. Then the older woman in purple. Then the students. Soon the entire ballroom was on its feet. Naomi looked toward the entrance where she had been stopped less than an hour earlier. The doors were open now, wide and golden, but she knew the real victory was not that she had been allowed inside. It was that no one in that room would ever again be able to say they did not know what erasure looked like when it wore a beautiful smile. The standing applause slowly softened into a hush, not because the room had grown tired, but because everyone seemed to understand that the evening had moved beyond ceremony into consequence. Naomi watched the 5 students return to their table with scholarship envelopes held carefully in their hands, and for the first time that night, a true smile touched her face. It was small, almost private, but Alexander saw it and held on to it like mercy. The dinner service resumed quietly, But no one returned to shallow conversation. At every table, donors spoke in lower voices. Some reread the program cards with new discomfort. Others called assistants, spouses, business partners, asking how quickly additional funds could be transferred. The donation total settled at $1.8 million, more than triple the original goal. Yet Naomi knew money alone could not cleanse a room. Money could build a doorway. Only changed behavior could keep it open. Near the side entrance, Victoria Hargrove stood with her coat draped over one arm, waiting for the valet with the stiff posture of someone leaving before she was asked to leave twice. For a moment, Naomi thought Victoria would disappear without another word. Then Victoria turned, crossed the edge of the ballroom, and stopped a few feet from her. The conversations around them dimmed again, as if the chandeliers themselves were listening. Victoria's face had lost its polished brightness. Without the stage lights of control, she looked older, smaller, less like a queen of society and more like a woman who had mistaken access for worth. "I suppose this is the part where you expect me to apologize," Victoria said. Naomi looked at her calmly. "No. I expect nothing from you." The answer unsettled Victoria more than anger would have. Her fingers tightened around the silver clutch in her hand. "You think one speech changes everything?" Naomi glanced toward the students, then back at her. "No. I think one exposed truth makes it harder for people to keep lying comfortably." Victoria gave a short, bitter laugh. "You have no idea what it takes to belong in families like this." Naomi's expression did not change. "That is where you are wrong. I know exactly what it costs. I simply refuse to pay with my dignity." The words landed gently, which made them impossible to fight. Victoria looked past Naomi toward Alexander, perhaps expecting him to soften, to remember old alliances, old dinner parties, old family expectations woven like invisible thread through their social world. Alexander did not move toward her. He remained beside Naomi, quiet and certain, no longer a man divided between his inheritance and his heart. "You will regret embarrassing me," Victoria said, but even the threat sounded tired. Naomi lowered her voice, not to hide the truth, but to keep it clean. "No, Victoria. I regret that you were taught a woman must guard a door to feel important." For the first time, Victoria had no reply. Her eyes flickered, not with remorse exactly, but with the first painful recognition that the room she had controlled had never loved her either. It had only rewarded her for keeping others outside. The valet arrived. Victoria turned and walked out through the same grand entrance where Naomi had been stopped, her silver gown trailing behind her like moonlight leaving cold stone. No applause followed. No one called her back. The doors closed softly, and the sound felt less like punishment than release. Alexander exhaled beside Naomi. "You gave her more grace than she gave you." Naomi watched the closed doors for a moment. "Grace is not the same as permission." He nodded, accepting the lesson without trying to improve it. Across the room, Eleanor approached again, this time carrying the gold donor card that had erased Naomi's name. She placed it on a nearby table, then carefully tore it in half. The gesture was quiet, not dramatic, but it drew the eyes of everyone near the front. "Tomorrow morning," Eleanor said, "every printed record will be corrected. Not edited. Corrected." Naomi looked at her mother-in-law, searching for performance and finding something humbler. "Thank you." Eleanor nodded. "And if you allow it, I would like to visit the Atlanta office. Not for photographs. To listen." Naomi considered her. The old hurt did not vanish just because an apology had arrived wearing pearls, but the night had taught her that some doors deserved to be tested again. "You may come," she said. "But the chairs are folding chairs, and the coffee is terrible." Eleanor's mouth curved just barely. "Then I will bring better coffee, but I will sit in the folding chair." Alexander smiled for the first time since entering the hotel, and the tenderness of it warmed something Naomi had kept guarded all evening. Later, when the final pledge was recorded and the orchestra began a soft closing piece, Alexander guided Naomi toward the quiet hallway beyond the ballroom. He did not touch her back without asking, did not assume the night's public victory had settled the private wound. They walked side by side past mirrors, marble columns, and arrangements of white roses that had begun to loosen at the edges. At the end of the hallway, near a window overlooking Manhattan, Naomi stopped. Below them, Yellow taxis moved along Fifth Avenue like sparks through darkness. I was not ashamed of being private, she said. Alexander stood beside her, hands still, listening. I was ashamed of feeling hidden. His eyes closed briefly, as if the sentence had found the place in him that deserved it. I know. No, she said gently. Now you know. He opened his eyes. The city light touched his face, softening the billionaire, revealing the husband. Tell me how to repair it. Naomi looked down at her ring, then back at the ballroom doors glowing at the far end of the hall. Do not announce me only when someone insults me. Walk with me before they question why I am there. Alexander's voice was low. I will. She believed he meant it. She did not yet know how long repair would take, but she knew it had begun in the only place it could begin, with truth spoken plainly and pride set down. When he offered his hand, she took it. Not because the night was healed. Because healing, like justice, sometimes began with one woman refusing to disappear. The final hour of the gala unfolded with a gentleness no one had expected. The orchestra played low and warm near the far wall, the white roses leaned softly in their crystal vases, and the ballroom that had once judged Naomi from a distance now watched her with something quieter than admiration. Respect. She did not need every heart in the room to change by midnight. She only needed the truth to remain standing after the music ended. And it did. By the time the last pledge was counted, the Second Door Initiative had raised $2.1 million, enough to fund scholarships, mentorships, emergency grants, and internships for students who had spent too long hearing that opportunity was somewhere behind a door they were not meant to touch. Naomi stood near the stage as Maya, Daniel, Aaliyah, Marcus, and Grace gathered around her with their scholarship envelopes, their faces glowing with the stunned beauty of people whose futures had just widened. Maya hugged her first, carefully, as if afraid the moment might break. Thank you, she whispered. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second and held the young woman with both arms. Do not thank me by becoming smaller for anyone, she said. Walk into every room like your name belongs there, because it does. Daniel nodded hard, blinking toward the ceiling. Aaliyah laughed through tears. Marcus looked toward the ballroom doors and smiled like he had already decided he would never fear a doorway again. Grace, the quietest of them, looked at Naomi and said, They tried to erase you, but you made room for us. That sentence reached deeper than the applause, deeper than the money, deeper even than Alexander's public defense. Naomi touched Grace's shoulder. That is what we do, she said softly. We make room. Across the ballroom, Eleanor Whitmore watched the exchange with her hand resting over her pearls, not as armor now, but almost as a reminder to be humble. When Naomi looked over, Eleanor gave a small nod, the kind that did not demand forgiveness, only promised effort. Naomi returned it. Some healing would take longer than one night. That was all right. Real change was not a chandelier. It did not dazzle in one instant. It was more like sunrise, slow, patient, impossible to stop once it began. When the final guests started leaving, many paused to shake Naomi's hand, but she could tell the difference between embarrassment and transformation. Some apologies were polished, designed to protect reputations. Others trembled because they had come from a place that had actually been disturbed. Naomi accepted only what was honest and let the rest pass by like background noise. At last, the ballroom emptied into a soft afterglow. The staff cleared glasses. The musicians packed their instruments. The donation screen went dark, but the doorway logo remained faintly visible, a ghost of light on the wall. Alexander came to stand beside her without speaking. For a while they looked at the room together, the place where she had been rejected, revealed, and restored, though Naomi knew. Restored was not quite the right word. She had not been broken when she arrived. The room had been. You changed it, Alexander said quietly. Naomi shook her head. No. I told the truth. The truth did the changing. He looked at her then, and the regret in his eyes had become something steadier, something willing to work. Tomorrow morning the foundation review begins. Your name goes on every document, every office, every board agenda. Not as my wife, as the founder. Naomi turned to him. And when they ask why you waited? His face tightened with honesty. I will tell them I mistook silence for protection, and the woman I love taught me the difference. The words touched her, but she did not let them end the lesson too easily. Do not say it beautifully if you cannot live it plainly. Alexander gave a small, humbled smile. Then I will live it plainly. The hotel lights dimmed slightly as midnight approached. Outside the tall windows, Manhattan glittered in gold and silver, restless and enormous. But inside the ballroom everything felt still enough to hear a heart choose again. Alexander offered his hand, palm open, asking instead of assuming. Naomi looked at it, then at him. She saw the man who had failed to see the cost of hiding her, and she saw the man willing to spend the rest of his life repairing it without making repair another performance. She placed her hand in his. Together they walked back toward the entrance, the same doors where she had been told she did not exist. Naomi stopped there. The check-in table was empty now, the tablet dark, the guest list useless without someone to guard it. She reached out and touched the brass handle, cool beneath her fingers. Then she opened the door herself. Alexander stood beside her, not ahead, not behind, exactly where he belonged. In the quiet lobby, beneath the last chandelier light, he turned to her. Naomi, he said, her name carrying all the reverence he should have given it from the beginning. I am proud to walk through every door with you. She looked at him for a long moment, letting the night settle into memory, not as a wound but as proof. Then do not just walk with me, she said. Help me hold the door open. His answer was not a speech. It was his hand tightening gently around hers, his head bowing until his forehead rested against hers for one peaceful breath. When he kissed her it was soft, grateful and full of promise, a quiet ending beneath the chandeliers, with no audience left to impress and nothing left to prove. Naomi smiled against the tenderness of that moment, then turned toward the open doors and the city beyond them, knowing that some women do not need permission to enter history. They arrive with dignity, speak with truth, and leave every room wider than they found it.